Okay. So really quickly before we get started, I want to
Mm,
explain to you what the Gaia Zine is and what our project has been over the past few weeks. So over the past few weeks, we've just developing what before was just an online publication for young artists and writers, because I know there aren't many opportunities to publish your work online as a younger person. So I started it about a year ago, and we launched in August. And now, over the past few weeks, we've been working to develop it more into just a platform with resources as well. So we've been conducting interviews and including like discussion boards, which will go up on Friday. So this hopefully will be part of that, whether it be written or recorded. But I just have a few questions for you, some that were submitted by some of our contributors, and some that we just were wondering if we could ask you.
mhm,
So without further ado, my first question is, lots of people say that throughout their artistic journey, they see a huge progression or drastic change in their art style then versus
mhm,
now and how they got there. So I was just wondering, like, if you could describe your artistic journey, and if your art style has changed drastically.
mhm, mhm. Um, so it's a two-part question. Uh, my artistic journey, well, I'll start off, I'll give you a little background about myself. I'm born and raised in New York City. I grew up in the Bronx. I went to a specialized high school that had some art component to it, but it wasn't part of the primary curriculum. So in
Mhm.
turn, I supplemented my art education by doing numerous pre-college programs throughout the city with various educational uh, programs, for example, museums, and then pre-college programs at specific universities in the city. Um, so in turn, my artwork changed because I changed. You know, I was once a teenager, and my work reflected my interests at the time. But as I moved further in my educational career, I got exposed to different things, and as I cultivated myself, my personhood, my artistry developed in lockstep. To give you more concrete examples, in high school, I was heavily influenced by a couple pop artists. Jean-Michel Basquiat isn't a pop artist, but he's adjacent to those people. I'm referencing Keith Haring, obviously Warhol. They usually have a grip on teenage students. You know, there's something about their work that resonates. And those were my influences, but I wasn't making work in that capacity. I was more interested in abstract painting. Um, when I went to college, I was exposed to sculpture. So simple. So in the beginning, so like plaster, mold making, using tools such as table saws and welding, things of that nature. I was able to develop a visual vocabulary that was conducive to sculpture, to making sculpture. And so through educational exposure, I was able to, like I said, create a visual vocabulary that was more consistent with the stuff that I was being exposed to.
That's awesome. This idea that, like, as you learned more and as you progressed just in your life, your artistic journey also progressed, which
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense. Those two things going hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so another question I have for you is, what kind of advice would you give your younger self specifically as an artist, at like any point? And if you had to
Mm-hmm.
pick like one specific time in your life to give that advice, when would it be?
It's a good question. Because it's directed to me, but I also know that that advice could be applied to somebody in high school right now or a younger person. Um, I would say keep doing what I was doing initially, having that kind of awareness to see that the situation that I was in wasn't servicing all my needs. So to continue to have that kind of gumption and that kind of drive to like supplement whatever I was interested in. So to continue pursuing pre-college programs and exposing myself and making mistakes and learning from them, more experimentation, more diligence, more practice, more study. Um, basically, just work harder or keep working hard. There wasn't really a flash point like, oh, I wish I did this differently, and in turn, I would have had a different level of success. As long as you're focused and you're doing what you're supposed to do, what you think it's right, things end up working out. And I know that sounds hokey, or that sounds like, Pollyanna-ish, but that's what it is, truthfully speaking.
Yeah, that is amazing. This idea that like um just keep working at it, and that's what will make you improve. I completely agree. So in your experience just developing as an artist, were there specific spaces or mentors or resources that helped you significantly?
Absolutely. I think I've been really good at that, reaching the mentor component, and being mentee and mentor. Obviously, now I'm a little bit older, so I have more experience, and I'm in a position of consequence where I'm able to mentor people. Um, but before, I was always keen on working in that capacity. There's something to be said about the learning experience and experiential knowledge um, that can be gotten outside of a classroom. So for a few years before undergrad and after undergrad and during undergrad, I worked as an artist assistant for multiple artists, and they were never really like, the work I did for them didn't really primarily overlap with the work I did. So um, 10 years ago, I was apprenticing for a sculptor, and at the time, I was still interested in paint. And then from there, I worked with this artist who was interested in like installation-based works and media, and that wasn't something that I was working on. So it allowed me to widen my perspective, um, and it just really exposed me to things that I probably wouldn't have gone to within a classroom context. Secondarily, I think community, like belonging to a community of artists, was so important, because whether or not, so for example, community in the sense of my peers, so people in my age band, so, high school students, college age students, people from post undergrad. Um, it's really important to belong to that community and support each other, because we're all going through the same experiences in some capacity, and that allows you to sustain meaningful connections that serve you within the work and outside of it. But also belonging to a community where not everybody's your age, or not everybody's in your station in your life. And it goes back to that community. For me, was built through teaching. So while I was an undergrad, I taught at a pre-college program, one of them that I did when I was a high school student. And being that part of the community and actually giving back to something that I was a beneficiary from was super, super important for me.
That is awesome. This idea of like such a full circle moment of being able to go back to where you started. What was that experience like?
Um, it was very good. It's very fulfilling. I developed very meaningful connections with a lot of people affiliated with that program, um, and it really gave me an opportunity to develop a skill set that I probably would probably haven't developed, and if I would have developed it, it would have been later on in my artistic and professional career. And the skill set that I'm referencing is teaching. So the the bare bones task of teaching, like creating a syllabus, and creating assignments, and planning field trips, down to like the more theoretical and conceptual components of teaching in terms of pedagogical philosophies, and what do you want your students to walk away with from your instruction. So those are things that you don't really get the opportunity to develop until you're actually in the classroom, until you actually have that opportunity.
That is amazing. So what class was it, or what classes were they?
It was two classes. So initially I was teaching a portfolio preparation class. So that class was exclusively high school seniors who were interested in applying to art school and in whatever related programs, so fashion design, fine art. And it was an intensive 2-semester course where they generated work for their portfolio. So it was a mixture of observational work, so still lives, figure drawings, and then we did mixed media stuff. So with things that they did things that they probably didn't have the opportunity to do in their respective high schools. So like monoprints, bookmaking, uh, serial works or sequential works, um, a little time-based stuff, but not too much of it. And the second class was sculpture. Yeah.
That is so cool, especially with the first one, this idea of being
Mm-hmm.
able to expose, not only are they developing their stuff, but they're being exposed to so many different things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's
Um,
important too. Well,
sorry,
I
no,
was just no, it was important too because similar to me, when I was in high school, I only had one primary way of working,
Mhm.
which was drawing. So some kind of mark making tool on paper. And it was important for these students to try their hand on a multitude or multiple different disciplines, because you don't know what you're going to take to. You don't know which one you're actually going to be like, wow, I really enjoy printmaking, or wow, I really enjoy observational drawings, or I enjoy painting. So it was really important that they had that exposure, because we just didn't
That's
know how they were
great.
going to respond to it.
This idea that like anything could interest you and you'd want to do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So exposing yourself to all of those things, like you were saying before, is the best way to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so another question I have for you, you spoke about how you're doing a lot of those things in the class that they don't have in their high schools. So what kind
Mm-hmm.
of classes, besides like the pre-college classes, like classes in high school or classes in college, do you think really prepared you for your career now?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. Belonging to community and specifically seeking out mentors. That was a form of education for me. There
Mhm.
was so many things I was exposed to that I probably wouldn't know within the classroom context. And then to answer, so when I was in high school, I knew that there were a lot of cultural institutions that catered to uh, high school students and teenagers, and so I wanted to be a part of that. And one particular program that I'm thinking about was called Youth Insights, and it was part of the Whitney Museum of American Art's educational program.
Mhm.
And that one had like an artist in residency component. So we did activities, and we used to critique. I remember critiquing Jasper John's painting that was in the permanent collection. So this is when the museum was on 77th, the Met Breuer, or now the Frick collection. So they had permanent installation. We created Jasper John's painting, and then we were working with this artist, Rashid Johnson. So we did a studio visit, and similar to what I'm doing now to an extent, he spoke about his artistic philosophy and the nature of his work and his ambitions and how he got to where he is now. So that was really really interesting, because I would say like maybe a year prior I didn't know that you can study art at the graduate level, at the undergraduate level, and then you can actually have some kind of, you can make a living being an artist. Those two things were novel concepts to me. Um, Maybe when I was like in ninth grade. Yeah.
That is so cool. Yeah, this idea of like, no, like a lot of people kind of write off art as like a hobby, but finding out this is something you can do, this is something you can study and you can pursue is, I think, one of the most exciting things about getting older and progressing to high school and learning about the different opportunities that are out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely.
So another question is a contributor submitted question, and they want to know like, how is it that you recommend you get your work out there?
It depends on what you want and what you want to accomplish. Um, there are many ways to bake a cake. To get it out there, I mean, Instagram.
Mhm.
Um, I'll give you an example. David and I met because we were both in a group show together. And the person who organized the show, he and I went to school together. And I know David can't speak at this particular moment, but if he could, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think they met either through a mutual friend or through some kind of internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
we were organizing a show and found his work in that process.
Okay, yeah. So to answer the question, putting your work on the internet, that will help. But I think the primary vehicle is building community, continuing to work, having a dedicated schedule or work ethic. And I would say belonging to a community, because there's so many opportunities, but everything isn't for everyone. So somebody might come across an opportunity that's specific for you, and they'll recommend you behind the scenes, or they might tell you, hey, you should check this out. That to me has always been the more fulfilling and successful approach for me. So.
Yeah, I thank you. I love how exactly what you're saying is that everything is tying back to the community that you're surrounded with and the experiences that that community allows you to have. So just one final question to wrap things up. I was wondering, if you were to describe your work in any words, how would you do so?
How would I describe my work? It's interdisciplinary. I work between painting and sculpture, but there's also paper making involved and collage and paper-based works. I think about larger issues in terms of space, place, culture, and how certain objects have a material history and have a certain resonance, and what happens when you play that up, or when you put two things together that probably won't have a symbiotic relationship. So this idea of high-low, so using valuable objects alongside of ubiquitous objects that people don't really pay attention to. So anywhere between plastic bags and then $70 basketballs. And the idea of stories and anecdotes, how these personal histories or these autobiographical or biographical histories harken back to a larger social phenomenon. So we're all living our life at the same time and experiencing the world in not too dissimilar ways, and constructing some kind of visual reference for all these larger ideas.
That is so cool. This idea of like the idea of putting, like you were saying, something really expensive alongside something that we just kind of, I mean, like you said, like a plastic bag, those are kind of things that are just there that we don't really give much mind to. So this idea of something that's super valuable next to something that's sort of mundane and invaluable, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think that's it. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Having me.
What was that?
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you for having me.